Welcome everyone to another installment of Bouquet. Hope you guys had a good week. Hope it was your Halloween was enjoyable. Totally forgot about that. Burning my little trendy sage again just to clear the space and make everyone welcome. So this week is going to be a little bit of an extension of last week in terms of healing, in terms of how I've healed, in terms of my experience with self-harm and cutting. And yeah, this week I'm gonna be talking specifically about music and the artists that have really stood out to me, or genres that have really stood out to me. And I have 7 genres for you guys, or topics kind of. And yeah. So my first topic is, well, let me explain the order in which I'm going first. I'm going in the order in which I first kind of grew an attachment to these genres. So the first one is a really, really, really good example. My first genre that I'm going to be talking about is jazz. Now, for myself, it's kind of funny because there is a substantial amount of jazz that I know and I can recognize, but if you tell me the name of the song and the artist, I'm like, I don't know who that is, but I just know it by listening to it. And the reason for that is because my dad always played 101.9, a New York City smooth jazz radio station. Always played that in the car, no matter where we went. So I have a really strong attachment to jazz, and just besides that radio station, my grandparents also kind of raised me in an environment of jazz. Like, my grandfather is a songwriter and my nana is a singer, and I guess I kind of just overall, my attachment to music is just very strong. I have a lot of connotations and a lot of emotions that go with particular artists and whatnot. But when it comes to jazz, the kind of artists that stood out for me were Michael Bublé, Norah Jones, Miles Davis, and John Coltrane. And yeah, I think I could talk about it for days because I took a jazz course in college. But yeah, jazz is the foundation. Let's put it that way. And as a side note, I should say that when it comes to jazz, there is a different side to it for me, just because for all 4 years of high school, I was in the school's jazz band. At first I was a backup singer, and then 2 years later I was the lead singer, and then by senior year I was playing guitar. And I will never ever forget my jazz teacher, who also was a teacher for other subjects, but for all 4 years of high school, Mr. Green has just been really the kind of soul of music, just very energetic and very uplifting all the time. And when it comes to my guitars, my acoustic guitar and my electric, I'm able to play both, but when it comes to playing or singing, it does the same thing as listening to music, but it's so much more self-conscious for me, just because I'm worried about am I getting the note right? Am I getting the tempo right? Am I getting the soul right? And there's just so many things going through my head. But I will say that I personally think that I'm better at singing. It's something that has come naturally to me, whereas playing guitar I taught myself, and I'm just very obsessive when it comes to playing guitar and getting it right. But yeah, that's another way that I attach myself to jazz. So the second genre that I really grew an attachment to was my emo phase. this was a very aggressive phase in my life. There were a lot of musical influences, but it's interesting because the artist that I chose to represent this genre is the only female artist out of all of them, which I think is really interesting. I am talking about Avril Lavigne, and she was just a real staple in like my emo phase. Like, I don't know, it was just like growing up in a typical black home. Most black people will tell you that like there's no such thing as self-expression when it comes to your parents, especially when it comes to disagreeing with them or being angry or something. So that was just non-existent in my home. And for me, my outlet was listening to Avril Lavigne. And she was like, I don't really remember if like I grew so much of an attachment to the lyrics, even though I was paying attention to them. But it was just the fact that like here is an artist that can remedy my teenage angst. I don't know. And a side note is that my dad is a drummer and was on tour with a group for a couple of years, and he got in one of Avril Lavigne's albums signed for me, and I was just like really excited. I was like, oh my god, you met her! Like, I'm so jealous. And the only thing that I remember him telling me out of the encounter that they had was that she was flat out drunk. So hats off to that. She's a real party animal, I suppose. So yeah. But some other punk artists that I was listening to at the time were All American Rejects, Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, Panic at the Disco, The Fray, Taking Back Sunday, Linkin Park, and Green Day. So yeah, that was my aggressive emo phase. Alright, so the third genre on my list of generations through music, or 24 years through music, I don't know what you want to call it, but the next genre on my list is indie music. And this was a real game changer for me, like a young black woman who just is kind of way outside the box for like typical or stereotypical music that, I don't know, was I supposed to be listening to that kind of music? I don't know, it's neither here nor there. But Arctic Monkeys was a huge change in terms of the direction, in terms of music that I went into, and also in terms of like what it meant to actively look up, you know, a whole genre of music. Because, excuse me, back in the early like 2000s, like indie music wasn't even a genre back in the 90s. Like it was just like something totally new, and for me it was extra exciting just because like I really had a thing for looking up bands that were originating from outside of America. Like I listened to a lot of British music. Some bands were Australian, some bands were Irish, just like all over Europe and whatever. I even listened to a French pop artist at one time. I had no idea what the fuck she was talking about, but the music was cool nonetheless. And indie music was like really the first kind of music that I really took a lot of active time researching. Like, I mean like I would say at least like 3 years or something. Like I just did nothing but research on indie music. And the reason for that, it was just so different for me. It was so different and catchy to me, at least. I don't know. But some other artists that fall into this genre that I really fell in love with are Modest Mouse, Red Hot Chili Peppers, The Kooks, Metronami, and more recently Tame Impala. So that's my indie list. Alright, so the fourth topic on my list is through watching the channel logo. When I was about, I want to say like 14 or so, I used to I used to stay up late at night when after like my mom would go to sleep around like 11 or 12 or something, and I would be in the living room just watching Logo and watching New Now Next, and that's how I really like, that was the foundation for really the kind of LGBTQ music that was either already out or upcoming and whatnot. That's actually how I found Lady Gaga before she got famous. And this was another big turning point because it really was, it was a learning experience for me, definitely, I would say, in the sense of that, the music that I had researched and loved or liked back then, didn't stick with me very long, but I'm really glad that I went through that phase because it was showing me what kind of, music, gay and lesbian and transgender artists are making or were making at the time. So I'm really glad that I went through that experience. I don't really have a particular band that really stood out to me in terms of this particular genre, but the three favorites that I have are Sick of Sarah, Her, which was probably my favorite, and Hunter Valentine as well. There are a lot of there are a few other bands out there, but I don't know, it just never, a lot of it is just like house music, which I appreciate, but I just don't listen to on the regular. So yeah, that's my strong learning lesson with gay and lesbian music. So